Welcome to By-The-Bywater, a podcast on the Megaphonic Network. I'm Ned Raggett.
I'm Oriana Schwint.
I'm Jared Pekacek.
And we're here to talk about all things J.R.R. Tolkien, his work, his inspirations and impact, creative interpretations in other media, languages, lore, rip-offs, parodies, anything we think is interesting. Thanks for joining us. Hello and welcome to the 79th episode of By-The-Bywater. It is great to be back with you all. We're dealing with it. You know what it is. It's everything. It's the world. It's life. But there are good things to be had. And Oriana, remind me, so is the next big screening for Sight Unseen going to be towards the end of this month, but that'll be before our next episode, this episode actually comes out, correct?
It's October 16th.
October 16th?
October 16th. Okay. It is a 9:45 p.m. screening, which I know is tough for a lot of people, understandably, on a Thursday night. But if anyone listening is in the New York area, we would love to have you. It'll be a really good time. The Chelsea Film Festival is like a real film festival. Like the movie will be shown at the Regal Cinemas Union Square, which is a big theater. Pretty exciting. I've seen a lot of movies there, so pretty cool to have one there.
Nice.
Very exciting.
And what else would you have going on a Thursday night, really?
I mean, come on. It's only an hour. The movie is only like 87 minutes, and there's going to be no trailers or anything. So I'm
gonna try and I won't say force, but heavily tempt some people I know out there to go and see it. So that'll be good. You know, add to the cheering section. That should be how it is. So, and in the meantime,
paid actors.
There it is. Exactly. Oh, how terrible. And in the meantime, otherwise, life goes on, etc. I think Jared's award season is finally over. I could be wrong.
No. So the Le Guin Prize hasn't been announced yet. So
okay.
Next month, I think exactly a month from today, they're going to announce the Le Guin Prize. I will say, I don't think I've got it in the bag. There's a lot of really, really good books this time around, but I know I keep saying this. Honor just getting tagged by Ursula Le Guin in an Instagram post is oh, okay.
You are legit. So, all right. So another reminder about that. We'll have more news about that next time. And also, hopefully, how the screening went and who knows what else. And me writing as usual. Again, find me on social media, blah. So there's that. And we have a topic to come up with, but there is a tiny bit of news, so we might as well share it. So, Jared, please take it away.
It's a very quiet month in news, but there has been one interesting behind-the-scenes announcement involving the Tolkien estate. Curtis Brown, a literary agency based out of London that's over a century old and has represented a wide number of notable authors and other figures in the UK over that time, will now represent the estate via its Heritage Division, which similarly represents the estates of authors such as Kenneth Grahame and A.A. Milne. Per the joint announcement by the estate and the agency, the wider goal is continued formal partnership in general, in terms of publications and rights, as separate from the specific rights for The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings that are now held by the Swedish-based Fellowship Entertainment, as mentioned a couple episodes back. The announcement was mostly pleasant generalities, but a possible hint of what could yet result came from Nora Perkins, the head of Curtis Brown Heritage, who said, "It is a great honor and a joy to be working with the Tolkien estate to preserve and celebrate J.R.R. Tolkien's extraordinary literary legacy and to help to bring new readers and viewers and listeners to his writing. Who knows what it all means, but we'll have a link to the OneRing.net story on this news in our show notes."
Nora, call me. Nora, let's talk.
Nora, as a renowned author, I'm reaching out to you. I'm speaking to you from the heart.
We can form a production company and take them some ideas.
There you go. So, but I mean, it is boilerplate. I mean, you'd see it almost about any similar sort of announcement and all that. But the careful, if parenthetical mentions of viewers and listeners is okay, they kind of know. But the question is, what exactly? Especially since those most of those rights are elsewhere, as they say. The only thing so far being, of course, a certain benighted Amazon series, but we've talked about that. So we'll have to see what else may result from that. So, again, behind the scenes stuff, I don't think there's going to be anything major. It'll come through for a while. But, you never know, and it is something just to keep in mind. So, with that said, and with nothing else really to add right now, as we're in an abeyance on the general front until some sort of news trailer or whatever or something surfaces, I don't know, Peter Jackson's team announces they're bringing back everybody as CGI, something absurd, we'll see what happens.
Revealed as a Polar Express motion capture thing.
Great. I feel better already. Fantastic. They turn out to just go ahead and aim for that monkey in Lost in Space vibe in the end. Who knew? So
you might as well. At this point, why not? Just burn it all down.
Cheap and easy. So, well, we'll spare you our rants, but we'll get into...
Why? It's a podcast. That's what it's for.
It's true, yeah. They're implied. So let's see. So,
Petty grievance.
Oh, dear. Yeah. But there is a topic. There is a main topic. I didn't suggest it, and so I will begin. Much as the three of us would enjoy a deeper discussion of what it is about heteronormativity and gender distinctions and what makes a family in general in this world we live in, especially in this historical moment, for the purposes of this episode, we're talking about something that Tolkien himself held traditional, deeply entrenched, and specific beliefs about, beliefs which show up in his work in a variety of different ways, on the subject of marriage. If we take the story of his life as determining his own opinions in an early age, above and beyond the basic societal conditioning of late Victorian and Edwardian England, where formal and formalized cisgender partnerships were the nearly unquestioned absolute norm, two things in his biography set a certain path. First, of course, was the situation of his own parents, an apparently happy marriage of the era that ended in sudden tragedy when his father passed away in South Africa due to disease, while his mother, his brother, and himself were on a trip back to the United Kingdom. His mother chose never to remarry before her own premature death some years later, and combined with her embrace of Catholicism, a faith which Tolkien never left, he seems to have taken on board a sense of absolute commitment in marriage beyond death, in line with traditional Catholic beliefs about avoiding divorce. The second was his own marriage to Edith Bratt, which lasted over 50 years until her own passing 2 years before his. Per his chief biographer, Humphrey Carpenter, it was a firm enough partnership, though certain times were more unsettled, including a stretch in the late 1920s and early 1930s in particular, around the time of the formation of his chief friendship with C.S. Lewis, as discussed in our previous Inklings episode. There's been some initial stabs at research in terms of finding out further about the marriage, but much is still speculative, though there's no question that Tolkien was the man of the house in a conventional breadwinner sense, a reinforcement of expected roles. Translating personal experience and belief into one-to-one equivalence in fictional work is always a mug's game, but it's fairly clear that Tolkien maintained his general beliefs on the subject in many ways throughout his work, and not just the legendarium. In both Swith of Wootton Major and Farmer Giles of Ham, I'll figure it out one day, for instance, the titular characters either wed or have children over the course of the story, in Smith's case, or is already married with children during the story itself, in Giles' case. Both marriages are seen in similarly, again, conventional terms. Smith and Giles have their own respected journeys and adventures, with Smith's wife evincing gentle support, and Giles is a crabby rough humor, both rather stereotypical visions, obviously enough. Neither marriages change per se over time, they just simply are. The legendarium, meantime, is any number of marriages scattered throughout its byways and histories, all of which are essentially exactly the same, conventional, cisgender, and almost universally gender role defined. The major species where such partnerships are discussed or shown in detail are humans, hobbits, elves, and, thanks to the extended meditation on their lives from Treebeard, the Ents. There's also the situation of the Valar, whose own slippery and plastic identity outside of the human/elvish form they can take can raise further questions again, even if Tolkien wasn't directly interested in exploring the implications. We've touched on elements of many of these relationships in past episodes. To name a few, Melian, Galadriel, Éowyn and Faramir, Aragorn, Sam Gamgee, Hurin, Turin, and Tuor are all defined in some fashion by the marriages they make and what results from them, while the central story of Beren and Luthien was so overridingly important to Tolkien that his and Edith's joint grave features the names on the headstone along with their own. Yet there is also something to be said about how marriage doesn't work in Tolkien in general, or is even absent. The two most critical figures in the Legendarium's two formally finished and published stories, Bilbo Baggins and his nephew Frodo Baggins, are bachelors for all their days until their joint departure to Valinor, And at no point is there even a slight suggestion that either have had some sort of attraction to a hobbit woman, for instance, though of course the connection between Frodo and Sam has been interpreted in any number of ways. In Tolkien's separate work, meantime, Nigel, the lead figure in the short story Leaf by Nigel, is similarly a loner. If the work remains primarily figurative nonetheless, it's notable that his closest connection in both his world and one beyond it is with his neighbor Parish. In all three cases, these figures may seem to have lonelier lives, but all achieve a kind of relief or bliss away from the conventional world in the end, arguably a rejection of the expectation that Tolkien seemed to generally celebrate, or at least further codify. Then again, there's also the extended but regrettably incomplete story of a marriage that ended up being a slow-motion disaster. Aldarion and Arendis, as discussed in detail in our 4th episode. It's notable that after portraying marriages and romantic partnerships that were successful, sometimes after hardship, or were crushed due to higher hardships and tragedies, it was only late in life that Tolkien showed something else entirely. A relationship and marriage that was built to a point of hope for the future, only for a deeper series of incompatibilities to tear it apart irrevocably. My own speculation has been that the failure of his son Christopher's first marriage is what led Tolkien to grapple with something like this in detail, where he hadn't before. But whatever the cause, it introduced something into Middle-earth that upset, just, enough of an expected standard to show there could be more to the story. But with that said, I've made enough of an introduction. Time for me to open up the floor. Take it any way you want. What do people want to say with initial thoughts about marriage in Tolkien?
Don't really see the happy marriages. We only, whenever there's one in detail, it's like, oh, this marriage is deeply unhealthy for both of them, or one of them is captured by Morgoth, and when they reconnect, they're almost dead, like that kind of thing. Or they're brother and sister, and they don't know it. What is up with that?
It's
more than fair.
Very interesting that the only marriage that we really live inside of is Aldarion and Arendis's, and it's full of just resentment and pettiness and not so petty disagreements, and that's really interesting. Also, one thing that I will bring up now to put a pin in is, we have all these marriages, but we don't really have weddings. Kind of interesting. Obviously, Aragorn and Arwen get married, but we don't really see a lot of it. It's just kind of there. Beren and Luthien, just kind of, he takes her hand in front of Thingol, and I guess they're married enough to have a kid, because there's no way Tolkien is writing
there's no out of wedlock.
But I think it's also, I guess, kind of well, I said I was going to put a pin in this, but I guess no. I am going to. But it is interesting to me that because there is no religion and no religious ritual, we kind of can't, I guess, have a ritualized marriage ceremony that, famously in Catholicism is a huge process. And constant jokes are made about how long the wedding masses are. Although what's funny is, my brother had a Catholic wedding, but the mass was only an hour. So I feel like we got off pretty late there. But yeah, and I think that's, as someone who didn't have a wedding, we just had a little ceremony. I kind of like that the emphasis is on the marriage when we do have an emphasis, instead of there's no fairy tale weddings in here.
I find this interesting too. It seems like, and again, I do find it very interesting precisely because it seems to go against everything we know about Tolkien's own personal belief in terms of, the religion he was essentially raised in and held to, is that it's the promise of partnership to one to another seems to be more important than the formalization.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, I hesitate to just, tie in everything directly to his biography, but that element seems pretty strongly given, that the whole idea was that he considered, and I still think there could be questions about Edith's end, but there's that he considered there were a partnership, as all said, it's sort of like everything else was mere formality, even though in the eyes of the law and the faith he was in, it's sort of like, no, there is this too, type thing. And I find that very, very interesting indeed. So
yeah, I did read, there's this letter that he wrote to his son Michael that's all full of fatherly, I don't know if advice is the right word, rambling about marriage and sexual ethics and stuff. And it's
Yes, I think I know what you're talking about.
He was an old Catholic. Like, what are we expecting here?
He disagreed with, having non-Latin mass. Like,
yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, and he even this. I thought this was interesting, though, not in a good way. He did pull out. Yeah, he pulled out the whole men are not naturally monogamous and women are thing, which is a bananas thing to hear from him.
Crazy.
Yeah. And I'm just like, ooh, say more. Maybe don't say more about that. But also, I feel like I need to know why you think this.
Right. Like, he gives such the appearance of being like the most wife guy who seemed to only have eyes for Edith. Was this not the case?
Yeah. And he talks about, women, again, are naturally monogamous, men aren't. He was the one who was obsessed with her.
Yeah.
And she got engaged to somebody else or something briefly, I want to say.
Yeah.
Like, during their 3 years of, not really estrangement, but distance, he was devoted to her. He had this whole, chivalric, lady love thing happening. And she was kind of like, well, whatever. I guess old Johnny's
Ronald.
interest. So where was that coming? Why does he think that? What's going on? Why does he think women aren't down to?
Wait, was that like a C.S. Lewis thing? Like, who was in his ear about that? Because we have had for quite a while now, instances, observations about the natural world and animals that do pair up monogamously. So it's not as though we are some, and I'm not even saying that monogamy is a condition, a natural human condition or whatever. If y'all are into polyamory, that's cool. Go
official By-The-Bywater stance.
Yeah,
polyamory.
I'm not here to say that monogamy is natural or whatever. Only that it's weird to say that it is gendered.
Yeah.
And it's weird to hear Tolkien of all, Mr. Wife Guy.
Yeah, the most straight-laced person that I am aware of being like, you know what? It's a constant temptation, man, to his son.
Equivalent of the birds and the bees talk. Maybe that's as good as it gets.
But maybe a little late for that. I'm guessing it's not the first time they talked about it.
Yeah,
let's hope not.
I think the context of the letter was his son was having relationship troubles or something.
I seem to recall that. Yeah.
And this is the advice you give? It's you got to stay the course, buddy.
Well, that's kind of why I brought up. I do think it's interesting, and I do think it's very, I mentioned the whole thing that, however much he might have been thinking about his own experience, I still think that the breakdown, the timing, I can't say I know exactly. So I'm not going to claim this as a definitive, this is clear what prompted it. But I still think the breakdown of Christopher Tolkien's first marriage, which was, if I remember right, around that time that the Eldarian and Orinda story was being sketched out, was one of the things that sort of maybe forced the issue. Even though I think there's a fair amount of it that's also still, from where he's at himself, which is always interesting to me because it was a, post Lord of the Rings success story at that point. If he had written the Eldarian and Orinda, say in the mid-30s, I could see where it'd be one of the things like, ooh, boy, you've got some issues you're working through about your own situation. This type of thing, it's sort of like he could be like, I quote unquote won. My years-long effort to be focused on this maniacal thing away from a typical structure turned out to have a payoff. But again, that's why I think the fact that he saw something that forever was modeling what all the rest of it, there was a breakdown, I think it made him go like, well, what's happening here? And that showed, it's the type of thing that in the same way that Till We Have Faces shows Lewis finally going, oh, maybe there's a slightly different way to look around this,
maybe
it's
women are people.
That yeah, who knew, and just sort of like, the 60s, man, they changed everything. So,
yeah.
But maybe to sort of try and get back to how it's sort of thought about in Tolkien. The thing that it was, also prompted me to bring this up was reflecting back about the papers that were in the Nature of Middle Earth that came out, because that's where we get the most detailed discussion of what a marriage or a life together is supposed to be like between, in a very, very gender normative sense. And that's not the human way, it's the elvish way. And his own idea of the Elvis as being sort of like, won't be so flip as to say metahumans, but in a weird way, you could use that as a certain framing in terms of their existence. And, amid all the other, all his insane population calculations and everything else that we got in that book, it was interesting seeing him trying to sort of spell out what that would mean, especially in terms of immortal beings. It's sort of how would this actually work? And again, we know what side he comes down on if we sort of who leads the family as such, which again also makes it interesting that Galadriel is clearly the leader in that relationship. It's not the purse we're talking about. We're talking about her. So I think it's interesting. Is it the exception that tests the rule? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, consistently, this has been a common theme since the beginning of this podcast. But women of Middle Earth fucking down, and consistently the women are the powerful ones.
Yeah.
Melian, Luthien, Yavanna, Varda, so why it's you can see him. He's the kind of person can take a strong stance, but tends to see too many sides of the issue to really commit to something. Unlike C.S. Lewis, who was just I'm right all the time. So you can see him being well, yeah, men are in charge. Oh, but women are actually really capable of stuff too. And giving so many powers and privileges to elf women. I don't know. It's just because he's arguing both sides of the issue on the page, which makes for really odd reading at times.
Yeah, there's a bit of cognitive dissonance, it feels like.
Yeah.
No, there is. I mean, I'll throw out it's sort of an obvious example, the story for him, the Baron and Luthien to a degree, and all that. It's sort of look, if Luthien hadn't gone out and found him Baron in the prison, there would be no story. If he was the one with power. She did. Yeah. So it's sort of he's the hero, but is he the hero?
He's the damsel.
Wells for boys. Baron is Wells for boys. I will not be explaining this.
Every Tolkien hero is Wells for boy.
The secret is out.
Turin is maybe the most Wells for boys. I think you're
I feel
right.
Tuor maybe is the least Wells for boys.
Yeah, I think that's just because, again, for the most part, now we have the fall of Gondal in the book, but before that, it was just kind of oh, this guy,
literally just some guy, yeah.
Eternally just some guy. But it is interesting how Idril herself, of course, is seems to have a certain. We don't get as much from her as we do for Luthien in comparison, especially in terms of later rewritings, which is unfortunate. At the same time, we get a sense that she's the one sort of it's sort of oh, the signs are not looking so good. She's the one who builds the escape hatch so people can leave. That's responsibility, right there. That's action. She's not waiting around. She's not waiting around for Tuor to realize something and all that. And she's the one who looks at Maeglin and goes no.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Go away. It is interesting, too, however, thinking of Maeglin, that the reason why he's around is that we have a case where it's the closest Tolkien gets with Maeglin's parents, Eol, and I forget his mom's name.
Arithel.
Thank you. Is the sense that we don't get any sense that there was any formal ceremony at all. And it's the closest
he
thing,
just kidnaps her.
Yeah, is Maeglin a bastard? Almost the literal only bastard as such talked about in the legendarium. It's sort of well, that's kind of interesting. So why would that be the case? Why is that not? Why is nothing like that brought up anywhere else? Because it's hard to think about. Everything else is more direct line of lineage and things like that.
And for that to go totally unremarked on. Is pretty weird. It's just Turgon recognizes him essentially as part of the family, and there's no question of his legitimacy.
Yeah,
it's just who married them?
Yeah,
did they just decide on their own? Are those I guess I'm stuck here, I might as well. What's?
And if that's all it takes to get married, there's we're so used to there being a social component of marriage ceremony, even if you elope or whatever, you do still need at least a witness, sometimes more. So it's hanky, isn't it?
It is. Maybe sort of shifting, I won't say gears, but foci a bit and doing into it. I was just thinking just now, what's the most successful marriage I can think of that is shown in situ right there and there, as opposed to the start of it and we hear it's later, with Sam and Rosie, which I'm sure is fine, and all that in Lord of the Rings? It's probably Farmer Maggot and his family, because you get a sense of a very pleasant family unit. You get a sense that she holds her own and things like this. Sure, it's a classic split. He's the farmer, she does the household. Regardless, you get a sense that it's that Mrs. Maggot is the one who hands out the mushrooms, and Frodo is very specific about that. Mm-hmm. and that the family comes in and they all share all share the meal together, and you get a sense of, oh, okay, this is just a happy functioning family, and it's not dwelled on, but it's not nothing either. And again, there's also the fact that it ultimately comes from the separate Tom Bombadil poem, I grant, but I can't remember if that's actually the second one, which is after the fact.
No, I guess Tom Bombadil and Goldberry are the other.
Oh, yeah.
Now that you mention it, I
Tom
suppose that's the other one, isn't there?
Are like couple, or like husband and wife goals, I guess.
They balance the health and happiness of their marriage by being very weird. Like, if I stayed in their house, I would just be like, does this door have a lock on it? I don't know what's going on here.
I would not have been able to stay as long as the hobbits did. I don't think. Really uncomfortable there. But it is very successful. They both seem to really love each other.
They're into it.
Yeah.
I love that for them.
It is,
when two weirdos find each other, like,
it is like, especially like, Galadriel and Celeborn, their marriage is so strange.
What is it?
Well, and I guess if you're immortal, that is just kind of what it looks like, is like you spend, a couple centuries together, and then you're like, okay, we can kind of just go off on our own for a bit, come back together, rule a kingdom together for a while, and maybe I do a bit more of the work than you this time, maybe not. I'm going to go back to Valinor and you aren't.
Some people flip houses, they flip kingdoms.
Yeah.
I was the doodle I'm doing today is very specifically about Galadriel and Celeborn. But isn't there a moment in I think it's in The Nature of Middle Earth, it may not be, and I may be making this up, I don't know, but he says something like elf couples sometimes just have really long periods of separation and it's totally normal and fine and they're cool with it and it's accepted. That has always been strange to me. Like, if you're immortal, maybe you don't want to spend every second of every century with the same person, and you can just go off and like focus on your Olympus making for a bit. I don't know. I guess that's healthy, sure, but it is a very unexpected element for him. Again, like, wife guy. Like, I love my curvy wife or whatever thing that he's got constantly going on. To be like, you know what? Sometimes couples just need to spend several years apart.
Well, I actually think that's a little less surprising given some of the other things we've seen. I mean, also thinking of Eldarin Arendis, where that happens essentially.
Well, I just mean,
time away.
What I mean is because elves are in some sense utopian,
right?
Like they are the ideal,
right?
For that to be an accepted part of coming from, again, like a Catholic who's like, men and women are meant to be together lifelong, like to have that kind of almost like pressure release valve built in.
It feels very modern, honestly. Like, I take vacations on my own. Like, that's cool.
Yeah. Galadriel going to Valinor is just like a centuries-long girls' night or whatever. Yeah.
Well, that I think is, I think that is the case, too. He's looking at it's like, well, if you are immortal, theoretically, you have all this time. It's the equivalent of, dare I say, it's the equivalent of, Tolkien going out and hanging with his Inklings buddies or whatever and all that. It's like, every Tuesday night I'm doing this, the equivalent for elves. Every 50 years I'm going to need to take a year or two off and go over here and study a bird or something like that. So,
well, it's kind of,
whatever.
It's the sort of thing that I was talking about earlier, I think, where he's kind of arguing both sides of the issue, where it's like, it is very idealized that like they marry for life, they're like swans or whatever, but they also there's also this extremely practical, non-idealized thing of like, you will get tired of this person and need a break.
All right, so I mentioned this specifically in my little intro. I think one of the more interesting things, especially since you could argue it's built into the name, Ents and the Entwives. I mean, we only do get that section of Treebeard's thing, and we're getting the Treebeard point of view, of course. But that seems to be a case where also, much like, the elves, we have the sense of deep, deep time. We don't even really know how old Fangorn or Treebeard is supposed to be, honestly. So it's sort of like, was he one of the original ones created even? It almost seems like it.
Doesn't he say there's only
the
3 of the
eldest,
original ones left?
Yeah. So, so he's seen it all, man, and things like that. So, and so there is also the sense that, even in this idealized eternal state, these shepherds of the trees, there was a point where there was a division where literally it wasn't just simply a couple splitting up, they all split up and they all went in a heap, so it's sort of like very, very gender
species-wide divorce.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, there's your great divorce. And
wives going their own way.
Yeah. And then, if we want to be, I don't want to say cynical, it's sort of like they went over there, we last saw them, and then they're totally gone now. It's sort of like, well, maybe they didn't want to come back. Maybe they're somewhere else in Middle Earth just going like, life's good, we're growing our gardens, everything's great.
There seemed to be not a whole lot of sense of urgency when they left, too. It was just like, yeah, all right. And
Which is
then,
very, very Entish, arguably. So it fits that. But
it's not going to it's not a crisis, it's fine. They're just moving across the street for a bit, whatever.
Yeah. And that sense of deliberation, which is arguably, it's interesting. It's sort of like Tolkien is, I don't want to say he's trying to, create problems for things that, we simple humans can never achieve. But in both cases, it seems to be the idea of, if you have a lot of time, you can take a lot of time out, and you can you can do things, and you don't necessarily have to be, all packed in together, which again is very interesting. So it's this sort of sublimation in terms of, what's going on there. Again, I hesitate to quote completely one-to-one, but I find it interesting that he brings that up as both something that is potentially ideal, right, with what can happen with the elves, and then potentially not ideal when there's just no return at a certain point, and sort of like, now we are totally on their own.
It reminds me of a friend of mine who his girlfriend was like, I'm moving out, and he was like, yeah, she's just taking a little break. I was like, no, man, she broke up with you. He didn't realize.
Whoa. Again, maybe the Ents got the whole thing wrong.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that they, at least Treebeard, there's nothing wrong with it up until the point where they vanish, but he's just like, yeah, it's fine. We had different interests. We Ents were content just to eat whatever fell in front of us, and the Entwives were like, we want a little more control over where our meals are coming from. He's cool with it. He's just sad that it turned out the way it did, but he doesn't. I think he doesn't condemn them for having entirely different interests. He even thinks they're still beautiful when they are tanned, which is so open-minded of him. What a king.
I love how his description of them is sort of like he recognizes, the age has done this to both of us, I think is what he's trying to say. But so but he says, the eyes are still the same. And I'm like, that's some good, honest romance right there. I like that.
It's beautiful.
It's sweet.
It's a really, really nice touch. So maybe sort of jumping around a bit, I mentioned some of the other stories as well, things like that. And again, it's a much different lens. But, I mean, it is interesting that both Smith and Giles in their respective stories, again, we get certain sort of, hard to call them idealized states, but they're particular states, I guess, in terms of what it's like. Farmer Giles' wife is sort of like, I don't want to say a shrewish harridan, but she's more sort of like, what the hell? Go and kill that dog, leave me alone, and things like that. So, and when she's the queen, she's clearly like, and I will take no crap. It's sort of like, just send all that, and just sort of like it's hilarious how much you just sort of like, go do all this, leave me alone type stuff. And then you have the contrast Smiths, I forget if she even has a name, just sort of supportive wife and things like that. So
women don't need names. You can just call them of Smith. It's fine.
Wife.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Got something there. So it's one of those things that, have that. But again, let's look at our two chief bachelors. Why is it that Bilbo and Frodo are Bilbo and Frodo? And why is it that it's them, the central figures of the two narratives, like it or not, or at least the one of which everything ultimately has to revolve around for both stories? And it goes against the rules if there are rules. There is no settled down, got married, and happily ever after. It doesn't exist. and it doesn't seem to be a lack. So the very absence of marriage in that case is really interesting, because he almost sort of like, oh, it's like, geez, these are two of the most important people in the entire story, without whom, ultimately, in the end. So, and here they are, and they don't fit this rule.
They have to be, I think. Also, like, the whole fellowship is unmarried.
At the time.
They have to, like, if you are married, you can't go on this kind of thing, because as we see in Beren and Luthien, like, your wife, if she's cool, your wife is just going to run after you, or something, or like, Morwen, who is Hurin's wife. She stays behind, and horrible things happen to her. So
yes,
I think, like, it is, I'm sure it's not just a storytelling thing, but I think they do just kind of have to be.
Yeah, I wonder, I don't think this is necessarily supported by anything. This is just me going off on whatever little road I'm going off on. But specifically in Frodo's case, the quest really does a number on him. And if he came back to the Shire with this awful PTSD, then Tolkien has to write a story about what PTSD does to the people that you come back to. Like, the really intimate relationships that you come back to, who have not seen what you have seen. And, like, Frodo and Sam went through all this. They understand each other. They don't, there's loss, there's pain there, but you don't have to reckon with what this does to the woman that you are coming back to. Maybe consciously or not, he didn't want to have to put that in there.
No.
Yeah, because it's not a good look for Frodo to come back and, like, a couple years later abandon a wife.
Abandon Mrs. Baggins.
Yeah, like, that's wouldn't feel correct. Whereas Sam does get married and stays with her for the rest of his natural life.
The rest of her life.
He goes too. Yeah.
Yeah. And why doesn't she get to go?
She wasn't a ring bearer.
Yeah.
Only
but it's
those
interesting.
people get the special golden ticket.
Yeah, but, Legolas and Gimli get to go. Like, why is Rosie forbidden the promised land?
I can't remember. Does Rosie die, actually? And he's a widower at that point?
I believe so. I believe so.
That may be the reasons.
But I take your point. Yeah. Outside of the story, why did he not write it so that she could go? I mean,
because that was just like an afterthought. Rosie and their 11 kids are kind of an afterthought.
Yeah, well, but the healthy relationships in Tolkien are obviously all the, like, really deep male friendships that are, like, really, really deep and really, really friendly.
Well, that actually... that's interesting, because now that you mention it, is sort of like a potential counterexample of that. Of course, famously, you don't see it in the main narrative. You only get a sense of it if you read the appendices, is Aragorn and Arwen, where it's almost like, it's almost non-existent unless you pick up on the clues, and until you get to the point it's sort of like, oh, here you go, type thing. And when it comes to Aragorn having a deep, long-established male friendship, the closest thing I can think of would be Gandalf. And even then, it's kind of like, it's a different dynamic for a lot of different reasons. Yeah. He clearly respects Elrond, but I don't think there's anything close to,
I don't think you could be buddies with Elrond if you're going to marry his daughter.
No.
I just don't.
And of course, Elrond
He's
himself...
not going to like that.
And Elrond himself has a ruined marriage in that Celebrian basically suffered and had so much pain, and so you've got another fractured marriage, at least temporarily, depending.
Yeah.
On how that goes there. But I do think it's interesting how we get a sense of what loss can be like. It ties in with quote unquote elvish identity. We get a sense of what happens when a husband dies and you've committed mortality, but now you realize, okay, this is it. There is no going back.
Oh, crap.
Yeah. I have rolled that dice.
I made a huge mistake. Yeah.
And however a lot of this was handled in the movie adaptation, the fact that they did actually have that as an element in the adaptation was sort of like, okay, it's a way to show the stakes. Again, I'm not saying the execution was perfect. It was not. But
no, it was a weird choice to have it to imply that she would continue living forever after he died.
Yeah.
I think that takes away a ton of what makes that story so poignant.
Right. We get a sense of, she wanders the woods, but we don't see her lay down and there we are. So it's
yeah. Well, and Elrond's narration is like, you'll just continue until every moment's of weariness or whatever it is he says. And it's like, that's not in the text.
Who's to say that wouldn't happened if she had just stayed or gone to Valinor? She might feel the weight of the years in that context as well. So
yeah. Well, and why I do wonder why in these cross-species relationships, why you have to pick. Why can you not just, and I'm sure the answer is Catholicism, but why can you not just stay, like, humans die, elves continue, why do you have to, like, join your partner across the gulf?
I feel like it's because the Hroa, like, the point of marriage is to bind to bind your spirits, and if one of your spirits leaves Arda, that's like a rupture that isn't supposed to happen.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
That actually leads to an interesting point to my mind. It just suddenly hit to me that one of the most interesting marriages in all of Middle-earth, because as far as we know, it has continued for thousands of years, is Eärendil and Elwing, who are arguably the only couple that get to choose what they want to be. And when they do, Eärendil says, man, this is, even though I've only been here a short time, this place is a wreck. I'm kind of out, but I leave it up to you. And when Elwing says, I want to stay and be an elf, he's like, I will do the same.
All right.
And it's sort of like, interesting generosity. He basically, he conveyed what he thought he would do, but when his wife makes the call, he goes along.
Yeah. Which is, again, for a guy who's like, men lead and women follow, who's the one making the decisions?
Right. Yeah.
And it's not even, well, first of all, I love that Eärendil isn't just committed to, like, elven kind now. He's committed to, like, wandering the heavens for eternity. But also, it is, like, so close to being a courtly love thing, where, like, the woman is like, wear my favor, or like, throw this tournament for me, or whatever. It's so close to that, and yet it's not like that at all, because the women are making, like, actual choices that affect everything, and not just whether or not some guy gets knocked off a horse. Yeah. And he didn't really like courtly love, so I understand why he didn't go for that. But it's interesting to have that format almost with incredibly different outcomes.
Yeah.
And it's not, at no point is it actually, nobody's ever saying it's that.
Yeah.
But it resembles it in really interesting ways.
Right, yeah. It's a reminder that you can't really reduce Tolkien down to pure medievalism, because it's not there. It absolutely is not a one-to-one on that front. So there's something to be said, too, for the very, very tiny glimpses we get of domestic lives in the stories away from the main characters. Now, I mentioned Farmer Maggot, and yes, we've got, Tom and Goldberry too, but, we're there with them for a little bit. But besides Farmer Maggot, I'm thinking of things like Aldarion and Arendis is really interesting in this regard, because while we have the overarching of the main story and how it is just a complete domestic disaster, which again, I still think some of his strongest writing is also how we have things like the view of when he goes back to Arendis and they go to the White House and everything is clearly falling apart and and he goes over to where the other celebration is going for one of his men that has come back and is being still there, and that's a case of all right, it's great to see you back. There's a sense of happiness there, and and there's this kid who's there too, and it's that, and then he's on the out, and then Aldarion is on the outside looking out all this, going like, it's sort of it. I don't want to say it's something where it's sort of like the other people can be happy, but not me. But it's interesting that it's sort of framed that way. And again, also we're looking at the fact that, we're looking at, the son of the realm. So it's a much different thing, who apparently has no peer. If I remember right, doesn't even have brothers or sisters. So, maybe this year with Aldarion was just a classic only kid. I don't know. So I have to double check on that. Maybe that explains a lot. I don't know.
Right.
So
we know
and
Kali
totally
May
new perspective
was
here.
an only child, and she turned out to be kind of a piece of work too. So,
who can say? So, looking ahead to maybe starting to wrap this up, though we've got a few more minutes to go here. So maybe sort of a throwing it out out there. So when it comes to Tolkien portraying marriage, portraying domesticity and all that, do you think ultimately he was one who could have portrayed it in detail, or did he always need to have adventures away from it, you could say? Because it seems like his whole idea is that something, I don't think he was good at necessarily portraying peacetime. I don't think that's his thing. I don't think he can quite do it. It's interesting that the one thing that he does that portrays a peacetime situation is Eldarian and horrendous. There is no great war to be fought. There is no great conflict. It's almost like you just have to sit with each other, and that ends up just tearing each other apart. Everything is distant and removed in terms of a threat. It's only hinted at, and it's sort of like, it's a question of, can you in fact live with yourself? I think that's interesting. It's sort of like, what happens if you don't have a defining conflict or something sort of outside pressure?
You invent conflict.
It's a trap to be too autobiographical about these things.
Right.
But he admitted on at least one occasion that his wife was not happy. And they loved each other. He loved his children. It seems like they were more or less okay domestically, but what was it? She didn't have very many friends.
Yeah.
She didn't really want to be Catholic. There was a lot of stuff that she wasn't happy in. And if that's your only experience of a romantic relationship, of domestic life, I don't know how you're going to write a healthy one for longer than a few, the few pages that Mrs. Maggot is in or whatever.
Yeah.
The grand romance that he had it's kind of like, it's almost like one of those stories where somebody's like, but what happened after the prince put the slipper on Cinderella? Where you have the happily ever after, but you have to live with that happily ever after. And the real woman with the tiny feet that you marry. And it may not go well. If you're basing it on, it feels like he was very consciously living his own fairy tale romance when he was younger. And then, again, had to live with that for the rest of his life, because he was never, he did love her. I'm not saying he didn't or anything.
Right.
But you can't idealize, changing diapers or whatever, all of the stuff that follows after the happily ever after.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that Beren and Luthien, when they come back from Mandos and live out their lives as mortals and all that, they, quickly check in Doriath. And then after that, at least according to the final published form of the Silmarillion, they just sort of hide away in a river island, and aside from one emergence when they help lead to destroy Thingol's killers, that one thing when they sort of march back, but otherwise, other than that, they just sort of disappear. We have no idea what their life was like. It's almost sort of like Tolkien could write the big romance, but could you write the 40 years that followed? Maybe.
I don't think so.
Yeah, and what did that actually mean? It's weirdly fascinating. But again, is that why we're reading Tolkien? I don't think so. It's sort of like, people can domestically observed minute observances of domestic lives and little interchanges is not really him. The fact that he succeeded so well with the one time he did it with Eldarian and Horrendous shows, I think, he had that gift. But in some respects, that gift shows up in contrast to everything else. It's precisely because it stands outside the stories that I think it's one of those things it's sort of weirdly refreshing. And the fact that, we haven't gotten anything close to to any kind of adaptation or wider understanding of the story. You kind of have to know it exists to know it exists is, I think, a loss in terms of how we understand Tolkien as a writer on this front. And I get why, because it's not something that, if you try to adapt I'm not saying we have to. Lord knows we've been talking about how there shouldn't be too many adaptations these days. But if I had to draw a very indirect comparison, deeply, something like adapting the Eldarian Horrendous story would have to be the equivalent of something like Andor in the Star Wars series, in the sense that you're sort of like, okay, what if you took the sides where you took everything as sort of like, okay, this is the legit deep background, but you're observing humans under pressure, if you want to say about its best. Again, not drawing a one-to-one. It would be interesting to see that exercise carried out. Could I think it could be carried out? I doubt it. Instead, it's one of those things
Gilroy on it or something.
Yeah, well, I'm right here,
okay,
you guys. I'm right here.
I was gonna say, just kidding, there's Oriana. But
oh my god, I peaked so hard.
It's okay, I deserved that.
Yeah, especially since since we know you did write a spec script for it and things like that.
I did. It's looking back, there's it's like a good first attempt, but there's a lot more to be done. God,
There always is.
I would love
just to. Today, I was like walking home from the coffee shop and I was like, you know what I should have done in the West Passage was this one thing. And it's like, I can't change that now. So it's how it is.
Yeah. Let's see, unless you do what Tolkien did and try and rewrite The Hobbit 30 years later and have it be something totally different and not work and therefore give it up and move on. So.
God, I should do a sequel that's actually a rewrite.
Are you that Age of Scorpius lady?
What?
There's a whole. I'm not on TikTok, but I recently learned of some book talk thing where a very young first time author released self-published a book. It didn't go so great, and now she's trying to redo it. And it's people aren't happy.
Well, we're getting a little off topic here, but yeah, keep that in mind. Okay, so why don't we just wrap up? Final thoughts: Tolkien, marriage, how marriage is portrayed, how it's discussed in the stories. Jared, final thoughts?
Well, I mean, we did a good job of not talking about this too much, but it's interesting. Like the most stable long-term partnerships are all men. All of the happy domestic moments are like hobbits in the bath or whatever. What's the deal?
What indeed?
With that?
What indeed? And Oriana?
I just go read Aldarion and Erendis. It's just so good. Really, adds dimension.
Yeah,
yes,
it's really uncomfortable in a good way.
In a very good way, yeah. And we'll just also note for people who are sort of like, where is the story again? Again, we talked about it in our 4th episode, way the heck back, but it's a good one. And you can find it now in 2 places, in Unfinished Tales, as well as in the Fall of Numenor collection that was edited and put together a couple of years ago. It doesn't matter which one you read, but check it out. It will have you thinking differently again about how Tolkien can write about things, whatever the prompt, whatever the reason. There's more there than you think the stereotype can be. Would have been nice to have more, but at least we have that. Okay, the choice for our subject next time has come around to Oriana. What are we talking about next time?
Okay, so you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I looked through our archives and we have somehow not actually done the Beren and Luthien story.
That's correct. We have not.
Yeah,
I've been thinking about it. We have not, though.
We'll read the book, the separate volume that has all the earlier versions, which I think are maybe my favorite part of the story, honestly. It's so fascinating to see the evolution of this story.
It's bananas.
It is.
And if anybody out there likes or dislikes cats and has not read the earlier versions, you're about to learn a lot.
So
put Fuchsia out of the room for this one.
Yeah. Oh my God. If Fuchsia had been a boy, you could have named him Tevildo.
I probably would have named him Titus, honestly.
Oh, good choice. So, all right. So Beren and Luthien next time. Yes, no, it has crossed my mind more than once. I'm like, dang, we've done all the major stuff, but there's this one.
Crazy.
I legit thought we had.
I was like, surely. So.
Nope. Somehow we have missed it. So yes, we'll come around to that. Just to clarify for people, there are 3. Tolkien had his idea of 3 great tales from which a lot of stuff sprang from. They would be the Children of Hurin story, the Fall of Gondolin, and Beren and Luthien was the other one. So yes, we'll finally get around to that. That'll be good. That is long overdue. I've been thinking about it, so I'm glad somebody finally stepped up. So thank you. Well done, Oriana. Looking forward to that next time. So we will come back to you then. We look forward to talking to you at that time. As always, we are on Blue Sky at By-The-Bywater there, as well as we're all on there individually. And of course, our main website is megaphonic.fm/By-The-Bywater. You can look for the episode guide there as well. And besides other things, we recommend you join the Megaphonic FM Patreon. Please do, because that means you can join our Discord and not only help support the show, but talk with us, share Tolkien memes, and learn why it is that Oriana apparently had Gollum face when trying to thread a needle yesterday, as we learned. But you know the joke if you join the Patreon, so you see. So think of it that way. So if you can, we look forward to seeing you there. And as always, you can drop us an email at bythebywater@gmail.com. Beyond that, thank you very much for listening. We look forward to coming back to you next time. Until then.